You done now?
Hi, everybody. This is Bob Gale, co-creator of Back to the Future, and you're listening to Brad Gilmore.
Doc! Okay, relax, Doc. It's me. It's Marty.
No, it can't be. Just sent you back to the future.
Yeah. Oh, I know you did send me back to the future, but I'm back. I'm back from the future.
Great Scott.
Wait a minute, Doc. Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
The way I see it, if you're gonna build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style?
Whoa, this is heavy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Back to the Future podcast, the only podcast looking back in time for the greatest film trilogy of all time, Back to the Future.
Back to the future.
I'm your friend and dime, Brad Gilmore. Welcome to episode 9 of season 9 of this year's show. I hope you've enjoyed the entire season thus far. We've had quite the colorful one. 2 episodes, of course, with Steve Franks. We had the Hill Valley Cookbook with Allison, who wrote that. Of course, the Time Capsule episode, JFK, Dan Abrams, Burrell and Marcia Gilmore. From script to screen, Back to the Future, the musical, with Tony, Angela, and Daz. Hill Valley Telegraph celebrating 37 years of Back to the Future. William Ramsey investigates Back from the Future. And this week, we have another treat for you. Because this week, we are talking about a movie that came out in 1985, not named Back to the Future, but did have Christopher Lloyd. If you remember last season, I did the top 5 films, top 5 Christopher Lloyd films not named Back to the Future. And Clue was in those top 5 that I had. And this movie came out in 1985 to a rousing, no, not so much a rousing, nobody really cared. It came and went in 1985, in the winter of 1985. And since then has gained such a cult following. And there's this, what is it, triumph? No, trilogy, not trilogy. What is a trident? There we go. There's a trident of films that came out in 1985 that I feel like if you like one of them, you're kind of married to the other 2 in some way, okay? And those films, of course, are Back to the Future, Fletch, and Clue the movie. I see a lot of crossover with everybody. And this podcast is with Jeff Smith. And Jeff Smith is making a documentary a la the style of Jason Aaron's Back in Time documentary. He's making a documentary about Clue the movie, which is, if you've never seen, I don't know how you're listening to the show. Stop what you're doing. Literally, stop the podcast. Don't listen any further. Go stream Clue the movie. It's on Paramount Plus, or rent it, or buy it on whatever you got to do. Watch the movie, because it is so much fun. It's Tim Curry. It's Leslie Ann Warren. It's Michael McKean. It's Martin Mull. It's Colleen Camp. Christopher Lloyd. It's such a great film, and it's based on the board game of the same name, obviously Clue. If you've ever played it, you know I've talked to Christopher Lloyd on this show before about Clue, the movie, where he plays Professor Plum, and I think I may have been the first person to ever point out to Christopher Lloyd that he played both a doctor and professor in 1985, which I hold near and dear to my heart. So anyway, my mother's calling me. Hold on, should I answer? Let me answer. Hold on. Mom? Hello?
Hello, did you call?
Yes, hey, Mom. I'm taping an episode of Back to the Future, the podcast right now. Can I call you back when I'm finished?
Yeah.
Okay, you're on the air. Do you want to say anything to anybody?
Hello, Back to the Future fans.
All right, I'll call you back, Mom.
Bye.
Bye. All right, sorry about that. So, without further ado, allow us to get to, and yes, by the way, my ringtone is Back to the Future theme. Just for everyone out there, it's on the Apple Store. Go get it. Let's get to this interview. This is with Jeff Smith. He has a movie coming out called Who Done It? The Clue documentary. It's coming out here soon. He actually reveals exclusive details to us only about when we can expect this movie. We also talk about one of the best stories, not for him, but just best stories to hear, because you go through the emotions, and all I have to say about that story is 2 words. Tim Curry. Just wait for it. Trust me. Sorry, Jeff, but It's a great story. Without further ado, let's get to it right now. This is Jeff Smith, the director of the Clue documentary, Who Done It? The Clue documentary coming out soon here on the one and the only Back to the Future, the podcast. And he joins me right now on the show. I'm so excited to get to do this and talk to him about this project, which, thanks to the great invention of the internet, I became aware of a few weeks ago. He is the director of the upcoming Who Done It? The Clue documentary about all of our favorites, Clue the movie. He is Mr. Jeff Smith. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh, man, Clue the movie has
Yes.
a documentary coming out.
Yes, thank goodness. Yes, it does. Very soon.
This is insane. So you're in LA right now that we're doing this. I hope you don't mind me
Yes.
sharing that information. You're working on the doc. Talk to
Yes.
me though about it. So where was the moment of creation for you? Why
Okay.
a Clue documentary? Because I have so many questions about this movie and about your work around it. So let's start. Why a Clue documentary?
Definitely. So about 5 years ago, I was on a medical leave of absence from work. So I was just kind of chilling at home and watching a lot of movies. Clue is one of my favorites. So it was in heavy rotation. And at the same time, around this time, there were like fan-made documentaries that were coming out, like Back in Time, which is about the making it Back to the Future, of
Jason
course.
Aaron, yeah.
Excellent documentary. There was one about Psycho and the Psycho sequels called The Psycho Legacy. And then there was one about Jaws called The Shark is Still Working. That ended up on the Jaws Blu-ray. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if somebody did one of these documentaries about Clue? Because every time Clue had been released on DVD or Blu-ray, special features were non-existent. There was never anything. They would kind of, they would advertise the big special feature was 3 endings, but that's the VHS. So it wasn't that special. So I figured, I don't think this is ever going to happen. I don't think anyone's going to, I really didn't think that there were that many fans of Clue as much as I was a fan of Clue in the world anyway. So wouldn't it be interesting if I just try to contact the filmmakers and the cast of Clue myself, just to throw it out there, just to see if they would, let me sit down and interview them. And the first person that said yes was the director, Jonathan Lynn. And then after that, Colleen Camp said yes. And then after that, Michael McKean said yes. And I was just getting a lot of very sure, why not? I mean, really, their first reaction sometimes was, why Clue? Because they all have these amazing filmographies. And I think at the time, 5 years ago, they weren't getting a lot of questions about Clue. And I said, no, that's the one I'd like to talk to you about. So I think that was almost kind of refreshing for them. That's what I want to talk to them about. So they started saying yes. And I figured, oh, wow, I really have to do this now. It was kind of a whim at first.
Did you have any prior directing experience? Did you go to film school or anything like that?
Yeah, I went to film school, and then in the mid 2000s, I had made this super zero budget horror comedy about teenagers in a house getting knocked off, and it was basically it was really Clue just done in an 80s horror movie parody thing that was called Stupid Teenagers Must Die. And it was a lot of fun and silly and ridiculous, and never expected to get distribution for that, but it did. And people either love it or they hate it because it's really cheap. It looks just like you would expect. It looks terrible.
It looks
But
like
it
the new
was fun.
Monsters trailer.
Oh,
I'm just kidding.
no, well, that's interesting. Yeah. So anyway, I did have that experience, but then I hadn't been doing anything in a while. So I had this film degree I hadn't been using, and I thought, okay, this probably won't take that long. So we'll see how long, I'll just put this together. Yeah, we'll see. And now 5 years later, it's just wrapping up.
Oh man, I love it. Yeah, it's funny. We kind of share a kinship in some ways, Jeff, is because when I decided to do the Back to the Future book, I pitched it. Never had written a book before. Only did some writing for little news periodicals and magazines and things like that. And then they give me the green light, and then I'm like, oh wait, You mean I actually have to write the book now?
Got work to do now. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I could knock this out in a few weeks, right? How hard could it be?
I know everything about Back to the
I
Future.
know it
I'll
all.
just put it all on paper. Everything I know.
And then you're like,
Yeah.
this is such an arduous process. I mean,
There's a reason why not everybody does what we do.
oh, absolutely. But I mean, but I'm just a solo entity working, typing in front of my computer. This is a documentary. You have to do all kinds of things, not just let's book the talent. Well, I got to get the equipment. I got to get, a crew together who can help me film this. I don't know anything about sound. We got to get sound rolling. All these things that maybe I don't know. I mean, you having your film background obviously knew that you had to get, but you get okay, I'm doing this. I love the movie Clue. It's a cult classic, but it's interesting that you're even doing Clue, because I understand why they didn't think that people would want to ask them questions about Clue, because at the time it was correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it a royal bomb?
Oh, big time. It came and went in December of 1985. It was, I think the budget was something around 18 million, and it didn't even make that. It was in and out of theaters really quick. So for a lot of the cast and crew members, it was a movie that they worked on. It didn't do well. They moved on and did a lot of other great things. And Clue was just one that maybe somebody would mention, but I know I've seen video of Christopher Lloyd at different conventions, and of course it's Back to the Future, Back to the Future, Back to the Future. And then every once in a while he'll get something about Clue, and he really doesn't have all that much to say about Clue. He just says, yeah, that was fun. And
I interviewed him about it. I interviewed him and I
Yeah.
asked him about Clue, and he was like, "Oh, who directed that?" Like, I don't think he remembered who directed it.
Yeah, it's so funny. Even the director, Jonathan Lynn, I mean, a lot of people don't know that there were originally 4 endings shot for Clue, because we have the 3, but there was a 4th. And I asked him about it, and he said, yeah, I don't really remember. I remember it wasn't very funny, and that's why we didn't use it. And he wrote it. It came from his brain. And he didn't really remember what it was. So I had to go out and find the old novelization of Clue to find what the original 4th ending was, and try to remind him.
Was the 4th? Okay, so people who don't know Clue the movie, there is 3 separate endings, and correct me if I'm right. If depending on what for the theatrical release, or did it depend on what screening you got had a different ending to it? Was that the gimmick?
Yeah, the gimmick was, and this was the idea of John Landis, who was originally going to direct Clue, and everybody that knows 80s movies knows John Landis from Blues Brothers and Trading Places, Michael Jackson Thriller video. He came up with the idea of having originally 4 endings, because the idea was people are going to love this movie so much that they're going to go see it 3 or 4 times to get a different ending. So depending on, in the newspapers back at the time, it would say, or even sometimes on the marquee, it would say Clue, and then have either the letter A, B, or C. And that's how at least you knew it was a different ending that you already saw, but you didn't know who it was going to be. And the movie works that it does work that if you pay attention to who's like missing in scenes, because sometimes all the cast is gathered around, but somebody isn't there, but it's kind of hard to tell. If you really go back and look at it and think about who you think the killer might be in this one, it does work even with 3 endings. But yeah, that was the gimmick. And I think, unfortunately, it probably confused more people. So instead of seeing it 3 times, they just decided not to see it at all. So when the movie came out on home video, they included all 3 endings. And so they showed the first one where it was one killer, and then it said, that's how it could have happened, but maybe this. And then they showed the second ending, and then it said, but this is what really happened. And then it showed the 3rd ending.
What was the 4th? What was the 4th?
The 4th, the killer was actually Wadsworth. The butler did it. And he had poisoned all of their drinks. So there's a lot of talk about poison and the poison cognac in the movie Clue at the beginning, and then it just goes away. So now it kind of makes sense that he had poisoned all their drinks, and then the cops all came in, and he escaped, and he got into his car to drive away. And I think it's either the police dogs or it's the dogs from the front yard that didn't like him, were in the back of the car that he was trying to get away from, and they attack him as he drives away, and you just hear like dogs snarling and him screaming, and that was the 4th ending.
I don't mind that
So
ending.
I think they made the right call.
I mean, I don't mind it, but the original 3rd ending, or I guess this is how it really happened.
Yeah.
had with Mr. Green revealing who he is, and you know, all the connections there. And is that the last line of the movie? I think I'm gonna go sleep with my wife.
I'm gonna go home and sleep with my wife is Mr. Green's last line.
Just perfect. It's a wonder though they never, because to me, okay, a movie studio's goal is to what? Is to promote a film, to get people to watch it and to make money off it, right? Go to the theater, watch the movie. The idea of doing the 3 separate endings for even a profitability standpoint makes a lot of sense too, and for the rewatchability in the theater. I'm almost curious as to why. Has any other film franchise tried that since? Has there been any, hey, come watch those separate endings? I know a lot of times on DVDs they have the alternate ending or whatever, but I can't remember a movie that's capitalized on that.
For a theatrical, no. I know that there was a movie around the same time, and I don't even know if it's available on home video anymore. It was called $1 Million Mystery,
Mm-hmm.
and it was sponsored by the Glad garbage bag company. And throughout the movie, it was kind of like it's a mad world. There was a bunch of crazy characters running around trying to find this hidden money. And the gimmick of the movie was there were clues to where you could actually find hidden money. And if you went to go see it, you could find the clue and then go find the money. And that bombed as well, because I'm sure most people haven't even heard of it. I didn't see it. Although I didn't see Clue in the theater either. It was gone way too quick. I was a home video kid with Clue for sure. And then I want to say when Final Destination 3 came out on DVD, it had a kind of choose your own adventure kind of feature where you could decide if the roller coaster went off the track now or if somebody died. But I have a vague memory of that. But as far as multiple endings in theaters, no, I don't know. That sounds like something like in the 80s they would do with TV shows where you could dial a 900 number,
right,
and decide if somebody lived or died, and pay $1.99 with your parents' permission. And but yeah, movie. I think it could actually work now, especially with people people wanting to go to the theaters again. But I think it was just way too confusing for the time that people just didn't get it.
So obviously the movie's based on the board game of the same name. The classic board game that so many people played. I remember playing Clue at a very early age, and I had no idea how to play it. I think it's actually kind of a confusing game. You have to think for sure. It's not Chutes and Ladders where you just go up and down and fall. You have to think. And I didn't play it a lot as a kid because you have to have 3 players at least to play, and I didn't have any friends that wanted to play Clue with me. So I didn't play a lot as a kid. I had it, and I had the VCR game because there used to be in the 80s there was a VCR game. Oh wow, I've never heard of that.
I don't remember. I just remember that when it came out, they had all the characters, but I was upset because they weren't the people from the movie. It's like, that's not Mrs. Peacock. But recently I played as an adult Clue and read the instructions for the first time, really. And yeah, it's slightly complicated, and it can take a while. And some people take it very seriously and have like a stack of notes off to the side, but you can also bluff with, it's fun. It's actually a very fun game.
Do you have a go-to character?
I like Green.
You like Green because of the movie?
I like Mr. Green. Yeah, probably because of the movie. Because I'm also a huge fan of This Is Spinal Tap.
Of course.
So,
but these go to 11.
Yes. So that was a tricky part when I interviewed Michael McKean, was staying on topic. I kept telling myself, don't ask about Spinal Tap. Don't ask about Laverne and Shirley. Just stick with the topic. And every once in a while he would, I think once early in the interview, he mentioned This Is Spinal Tap. And I kind of just went to myself, like, he said it. But I didn't pursue it because I could do a whole thing on This Is Spinal Tap. That's one of my favorite movies of all, but that's kind of well-covered territory.
I know. I had to do a couple of years ago. Rob Reiner was doing a radio tour for something. He was promoting like a fundraiser or something, and they were very strict about ask him about the fundraiser. The fundraiser only.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how do you not ask Rob Reiner about all his classic movies? I wanted to ask him even about North. I wanted to get deep with him, but I had to throw in a Spinal Tap, and nobody was like to work with Andre the Giant. The wrestling fan in me had to know that.
Sure.
But I understand that. So you're a fan of the movie as a kid. And I want
Yes.
to talk about the cast because this movie it's a very specific kind of comedy in my eyes. It's got slapstick elements, right? It does. It's got a very British sense of humor in some kind of ways, and some of it is political satire that you have to be abreast of the political atmosphere at the time, even when the movie's set. In some ways, you have to know who J. Edgar Hoover is, and what a red herring is, and communism, and these things, right? So the cast makes it work. And I don't know a whole lot about the background of why everyone was cast, but I do know that Tim Curry, who to me is the heart and soul of that film. I mean, he's
Definitely.
what makes it work more than any other single character. Everybody puts in a great performance, but Tim Curry makes it work. He wasn't the original choice, right? Wasn't he like way down on the list?
He was down the list, I think, when they first started writing it, or maybe this is even when John Landis was coming up with the story. The idea was it was written around John Cleese being in mind,
Makes sense.
which I could see. And then there was also talk about Rowan Atkinson, but Rowan Atkinson wasn't really known in the United States at the time. So Paramount, I think he even sent a reel for them to watch, but Jonathan Lynn thinks that they didn't even bother watching it. And then Tim Curry, yeah, I was down the list, but what's funny is Jonathan Lynn and Tim Curry, I don't know at what age they met, but they kind of grew up together. I think they went to the same school or something like that. So they had known each other ahead of time, but he was not who the script was written for. But now it's impossible to picture anybody else doing what he did in that movie because it's amazing what he pulls off.
Yeah,
And going back to the sense of humor of the movie, it's right. It shouldn't work because it has every kind of, the tone can jump around. I mean, the very first joke in Clue is a man stepping in dog poop. That's the first joke. That's how it starts. And then, it gets super intellectual. And when you see it as a kid, you don't know what a red herring is. You don't know why it's a joke that J. Edgar Hoover's on my phone. He's on everyone else's. Why would it be on mine? Or even when he says, you have, that's a double negative, that becomes proof positive. I mean, there's so much like double speak and it's going on super fast. And it's part of the rewatchability of the movie is that there's a lot going on. And it's nice that during the pandemic, when theaters started showing older movies just because there weren't any new movies, I had a chance to see Clue a couple times on a big screen, and watching it, large and in the theater, you pick up on things that you don't see when you're watching it on TV or on your phone at home.
Such as what?
There's a moment where the moment that stands out, Mr. Green, it's in Indy number 2 where spoiler, Mrs. Peacock's the killer.
Yes.
And Wadsworth says, monkey's brains, though popular in Cantonese cuisine, and not often to be found in Washington, D.C. And Mr. Green goes, oh, is that what we ate? And he acts like he's going to throw up, and he walks off screen. But Mrs. Peacock she hasn't taken the gun out of her purse yet. So she's just being accused, but Mr. Green goes off to throw up in the bathroom. And then when he comes out, he just kind of comes out, he's wiping his glasses. And at this point, Mrs. Peacock has the gun and she's pointing at everybody. And Mr. Green just stops like stunned in the background, like, what did I miss? And I never noticed that before until I saw it on the big screen, that there's this whole little shtick going on with Michael McKean in the background of like, I just went to throw up. And oh, now Mrs. Peacock has a gun.
Yeah,
Little stuff like that.
man, just even some of the lines from this movie, it's so quotable when you start saying, monkey's brain, although popular in Cantonese cuisine, is not often found in Washington, D.C. The cast is great. So we've talked about Michael McKean. We talked a little bit about Tim Curry. But Miss Scarlet is Leslie Ann Warren, who I think was just another one of those just perfect castings. I read somewhere, though, that she wasn't the original pick.
She was not. The original Miss Scarlet was going to be Carrie Fisher. And
I could see that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And she was cast. She was actually cast in the part. And Jonathan Lynn went to go meet her at an Italian restaurant right before the movie. started filming. And I guess when she came into the restaurant, she tripped over a chair, was kind of having trouble. And when Jonathan Lynn told his wife that Carrie Fisher was going to be Miss Scarlet, she said, "What are you doing? She's a drug addict." And he said, "How do you know that?" And she said, "Well, it was in the Daily Mail. Everybody knows that." And the Daily Mail is kind of like this. It's like the National Enquirer.
Yeah, it's like a rag mag. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a total rag. So it's not necessarily true. But in this case, as we all know now, sadly, it was true. So right before they started filming, Carrie Fisher called John DeLynn and said, "Hey, just want to let you know I'm in rehab." And he said, "Oh, are you going to still be able to do the movie?" And she said, "Oh, yeah, they'll let me out during the day. And then when we're done, I'll go back to rehab," which that's not how rehab works, but that's what she said. And the studio was okay with it. Dawn Steele was the executive at Paramount at the time. She was okay with it. Deborah Hill, the producer, she was okay with it. The insurance company, however, said, "No, we're not doing that." So Leslie Ann Warren, and I cannot picture this, was originally going to be Mrs. White, who Madeline Kahn played.
Yeah.
Cannot picture it at all. So once Carrie Fisher was out, they did some musical chairs. They put Leslie Ann Warren in the part, which Leslie Ann Warren, I interviewed her, and she said she was way more right for Miss Scarlet. It's kind of a mystery right now. I had talked to, there's a gentleman named John Hatch who's writing a book about Clue.
Oh, nice.
That I got to talk to. He was actually the one I came out to California to do the last interview for the documentary. He's got a wealth of knowledge as well. And we're trying to compare notes on how did Madeline Kahn end up at the last minute, especially Madeline Kahn, who should be nobody's last minute. She should be like first choice for anything.
This is an Academy Award nominated actress.
Amazing. One of the best comedians of all time. And it's not, the thing with Clue not being a hit is there's not a lot of research that can be done because there's not really too many behind the scenes photos. There's not a lot of footage from the filming. I mean, the only thing I have found was an Entertainment Tonight special that filmed them on the set once, and I think had a little bit of footage from the premiere, but it's very scarce, very scarce. So it's hard to tell when Madeline Kahn made her appearance, but thank goodness she did, because if Tim Curry's number one, she's has the most memorable line in the movie, at least, with the flames on the
flames,
side.
Flames. Yes, of course.
Yes.
Well, how about Christopher Lloyd? Because when I interviewed Christopher Lloyd, it was about Back to the Future, obviously, but I remember telling him, you hold this unique distinction of playing both a doctor and professor in 1985, right? And I don't think that a thought had ever occurred to him. And we talked a little bit about Clue, but he's Professor Plum in the movie. Yeah. How did he become involved? What do you know about his involvement in a film? And you interviewed him for this doc?
No, I did not. I had a lot of people. I had Colleen Camp. I had Lee LaShawn, who did the Back in Time documentary. I had a lot of people trying to help me get Christopher Lloyd. And unfortunately, it never transpired. So I have some footage of him from a convention talking about Clue a little bit, but I never had the opportunity to sit down with him. It sounds like the way they cast everybody was just based on their past work. I don't think there was a lot of, other than Colleen Camp, I know she had to read for Yvette because there were a couple other actresses that were reading for that at the time. But I know like Michael McKean, the reason he brought up Spinal Tap is because John DeLynn had seen Spinal Tap and thought he was a good actor. And they just kind of had meetings as opposed to auditions. So I believe Christopher Lloyd just was known from his work probably on Taxi at the time and was just cast for that. Although it's the part that he plays as Professor Plum is not like anything that he had played up until then. I mean, he's a real creep. And, years later, with the way, we look at things now, he's really a creep.
Yeah.
But actually, that's part of the fun of Clue is they're all really terrible people.
Right.
And we love them all. And actually, if you think about it, there's no reason for them all to hang around and solve the murder. They should all just leave. But they don't. So good. We have a movie. but they've all just done terrible, terrible things. And probably Professor Plum might be the worst.
Well, yeah, I mean, what is he? He's a professor, like a therapist who sleeps with his patients, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Including a young.
He was that. I mean, he's a creep the second he meets Miss Scarlet. So, he touches her inappropriately
Right.
several times. And what's interesting about Christopher Lloyd, and maybe, I don't know the experience you had when you interviewed him, Leslie Ann Warren, when talking about him, said he was interesting because she never really was sure when he was acting or not, because he's kind of a kooky dude. And I guess he's just kind of like that when the camera's on and when the camera's off.
Yeah, he's a red light guy from what I've heard. I mean, and just when he's on set, he's going to always, not so much a method, but he just kind of wants to stay in that rhythm of his takes, from what I understand, because Robert Zemeckis would have to sometimes tell him that the camera was on, even when it wasn't, because Chris wouldn't kind of give you that full performance unless he knew.
Oh,
it
yeah,
was on,
that's interesting, yeah. So,
but you're right, it was nothing like he'd done before, because normally Christopher Lloyd, even if it's Jim Ignatowski or if it's Doc Brown, which he did in the summer of the same year as Clue, big, like real big. And this, he's creepy, but he's also a little bit subdued, right? I mean, he's not the zany Christopher Lloyd.
No, he never has a moment where he, quote unquote, does his Christopher Lloyd. He always, I mean, the most he emotes is when he finds out he killed the butler instead of Mr. Body, and he says, "Oh, shucks." That's as big as he gets, really, in the movie. So yeah, very different. Because even his part in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, it's somewhat subdued, but it's also pretty out there as well. So yeah, it's very interesting that he was picked for this, because it's against type, really. Other than just being a bad guy, because he's one of the best bad guys between this, Star Trek 3 and Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit, yes.
He plays a great bad guy. And this one, you don't really think about how bad he is because he's so quiet, but no.
Not a great guy.
And it's amazing that Parker Brothers at the time was okay with their brand having characters like that based on their board game.
You know what? That thought has never occurred to me, that this, at the end of the day, is a child's board game.
Right.
And
About murder,
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So we're already kind of dealing in some murky territory, but nevertheless, I mean, I just wonder. So, okay, I have a couple more questions about this cast, and then I want to get to the script, because you are right. Nobody in the cast should be as likable as they are, or as endearing as they are in some ways.
Sure.
In a lot of ways, it's kind of like Seinfeld, right? Like, none of these four characters have really a redeeming quality, but we still love to watch them, and we find ourselves rooting for them. I mean, George Costanza, where nothing works out for him, we still love George, right?
Yeah, of course.
Was that? Well, let me ask you one more about the cast. Martin Mull, I think, is perfectly cast. I believed he was Colonel Mustard.
Yes.
Was he kind of Colonel from the beginning? Was that always?
Yeah, I've never heard any other name other than Martin Mull for Colonel Mustard.
Now, Colleen,
everybody was pretty much first choice other than Wadsworth and Scarlett and Mrs. White. I think everybody else that I had heard was who John Flynn wanted to have.
We said Colleen Camp was up against a couple other actresses.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who else. There were some, I wish I could remember right now, but I know that there were a couple of people that did become names. I think it's on the IMDb trivia, but I don't remember right off the top of my head. But she was not the only one going for the tiny maid dress.
Right. Yes, of course. I mean, as a young viewer, obviously Colleen Camp was the object of pretty many people's desire.
She was very important to a lot of young viewers in the 80s. That's for sure. On my YouTube channel for the documentary, I put together like some best of whichever character's moments, just as a little montage, just for the Clue fans. And the best of Yvette has the highest view count by far.
I don't know why that would.
Don't know why. Well, she's very funny, and
she is.
People love French accents, I guess. And that's it. Leslie Ann Warren is number 2.
Again, totally get it. Totally get it. Totally get it. I mean, you're looking at, I think,
And Leslie Ann Warren looks exactly the same as she did back in 1985. It was very strange walking into her home and meeting her, going, oh, wow, you're still Miss Scarlet. This is amazing.
so a favorite show of mine, we're talking about Seinfeld, a favorite show of mine is a show called Psych.
Okay.
And I actually talked to the creator and head writer of Psych, Steve Franks, a few weeks ago on the podcast, and Clue came up because they did, for their 100th episode, a rendition of Clue. You're nodding along like you know this, so I'm
Yes.
sure that you do. But they got a lot of the cast back together. As a Clue fan, how did you find out about the Psych 100 Clues episode?
I found that out from Leslie Ann Warren, which sounds so name droppy, but that's how I found out. Because
Look at
at the
you.
time, I'd never seen Psych, but it was while she was talking to me about Christopher Lloyd and how eccentric he was. But she had mentioned that she had just done or maybe not just done, but she said the last time she saw him was when her and Martin Mull and Christopher Lloyd did Psych, the 100th episode, which has a lot of references to Clue. So obviously they're Clue fans. And only in the last maybe year, I started watching the show just to watch it. So that was the first episode I ever saw, was the Clue one. And I thought, this is the funny show, but do I only like it because they obviously like Clue? And now it's one of my favorite shows. I think it's great. I think I'm right in the proper age group where I get every reference that they throw out, like everything. It's like a show that's written for me. It's just
Well, also being a
such
murder
good show.
mystery guy, right? Like,
Yeah, that too. And then I saw that Tim Curry did an episode as
Mhm.
well that wasn't Clue related, but he did a fun episode where he was kind of a Simon Cowell type character,
American
and that was
Duos, yeah.
great.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, they obviously were fans. And then there was another show, a sci-fi show that did what was it called? Because I had emailed the producer of that, trying to get them to be interviewed, and never got back from them. But another sci-fi show, I think on the Sci-Fi Channel, did a Clue kind of episode as well. So Clue's coming back. And that's something I've learned over the last 5 years. As I mentioned before, that I thought no one's going to make a Clue documentary because I don't think that many people, are that passionate about Clue. The biggest surprise that I've had over these last 5 years is how many people really do love Clue. And it kind of shaped the way the documentary is, where at first I thought, oh, this is just going to be kind of like, I'm going to get as many cast and crew members as possible. We're going to talk about behind the scenes stories, and that'll be it. But because I've run into people that love it, and it's shaped what they do, like, people that always wanted to have a t-shirt that said "Flame to the Side of My Face," but they don't make merchandise for the Clue movies. So they opened up their own Etsy store. Or people that have reaction channels on YouTube that react to Clue, and that's the first time they've seen it. It's the fandom that is growing has been fascinating, and I didn't realize it was happening until I was in the middle of it too. And so the second half of the documentary really becomes about how it's affected people now. And it's really cool. It's been a very nice surprise. And here we are talking about it, like, for the exact same reason.
Yeah, I mean, again, before we rolled, or maybe we were already recording, but no, I think it was before. It was like 3 movies that for me always seem to coincide and intersect with each other, especially in fandom, is Back to the Future, that we've talked about a lot, Clue, and Fletch, all of which came out in 1985, coincidentally enough. But there's something about each of those films have a huge fandom. I mean, there's even a Fletch podcast. I'm looking to have some of those guys.
Oh yeah, that's a great podcast too.
Oh, they're great.
Jim, yeah.
Yeah, Laker Jim. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And Laker Jim's been great to me. He put me in contact with Burton Gillum, who, of course, from Blazing Saddles and Fletch and Back to the Future 3. I interviewed him this morning. A fellow Texan and a great guy. But yeah, there is a fandom right now, and I guess because of the internet, Clue became what was a box office flop that we covered earlier. It kind of came and went. When was, though, the cult status achieved for it? Because even now, next Friday, I'm in Houston, Texas, and there's a production of Clue of a play that's based on the movie. Not the game, but it's based on the film that's based on the game. And so it seems to be that all these things about Clue coming up. When did it reach this cult status?
It's a very good question. I think it happened quietly. It's the kind of movie that, depending on your age, either you grew up with it on VHS or it was on cable a lot, or it became Jeffrey Kramer, who plays the motorist, calls it a babysitter picture. It's the kind of movie that you feel safe enough with it that parents who were, the age now that when Clue came out, feel safe putting it on, even though it does have things that go way over your head as far as the double entendres and everything, but they feel safe with it. I think the repeatability factor makes people enjoy it. I think that it's so quotable. And I also think it's not, because it's not Back to the Future, which everybody loves, and I think people kind of grab onto it a little bit more because it's not hipster, but it's kind of like,
It's the band that no one else knows about.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think people didn't really realize it. And it's not the first movie you talk about when you talk about 80s movies, because it also doesn't feel like an 80s movie because it's, a period piece. 1954 is when it's set. So it doesn't, have like that charm of, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, where you can, with a soundtrack or anything like that, or, even have a Power of Love or any, like, there's no, Miss Scarlet song that played over the end credits, although that'd be awesome. So I think it just quietly happened, and then everyone's just been finding each other through things like John Hatch's book, or from the documentary, or for just people of making these little Instagram pages or memes. I mean, there were a lot of memes during the pandemic about, with the Howard Hessman as the, your souls are in danger and everything. There were a lot of things like that. And I think flames on the side of my face, people now they quote when they don't necessarily know what it's from.
No, it's definitely a GIF people use. I see that GIF all the time.
So I think, and that's why I said I was surprised by it too, because all of a sudden here we were, and I thought, well, that's kind of lucky for me that I've been doing this and had no idea that it was as popular as it was. But of course, that wasn't the reason why I did it. But it was just because I loved it. But it's been so cool to see that somehow this is kind of the rise of the Phoenix. Just kind of appeared on its own merit. It's not from any gimmick or not from anything like ironic. It's not ironic love for it. It's not like The Room.
Yeah, it's not like it's so bad that.
Yeah, even it's not like, it's got a fan base now, kind of like Rocky Horror Picture Show, but it's not Rocky Horror Picture Show. But I have been at screenings where people quote along with it, or who would dress up. I mean, I've seen people of all genders come in as all different characters at different screenings, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know when it happened, but it did, and it's cool.
Oh, it's great. I mean, again, and I think you're right. Part of it's just internet culture. Part of it's just people, because but I'd say readily available, but it's not like it's on it didn't get like a Netflix run that I know of, did it? I mean, to where people found it.
It's on Paramount Plus now, but it was, okay. I think what people like about it too, maybe they discover it on their own. Mm-hmm. Like, no one told them really, oh, you have to go watch it. There's a discovery thing to it now. Where I think it's intriguing enough if maybe there's a cast member they know that they like. I'm sure Christopher Lloyd is somebody that, because of Back to the Future, that brings people. I know a lot of Rocky Horror Picture Show fans, because of Tim Curry, find their way to Clue, and then they discover it on their own. And I think that's part of that weird little ownership of feeling like this is my 80s movie that no one else knows, but now we know everybody does. But it found its way on its own.
It is odd, because I mean, I even remember I was a kid when I saw it, and I rented it from the Hollywood Video down the street from my house is where I first got it. So there is like a moment of discovery, I guess, for a lot of people. So, okay, you make this decision to do it. You make the decision to do the documentary. Having not done a documentary before, what is the preparation like? Because, we've all seen docs, and we've seen the talking head kind of with interspersed with footage. I mean, there's so many different ways to do it. There's the Ken Burns model and things. But what is your first step? Okay, I'm doing it. Now I need to what?
So I went in very naively. I went in with not a lot of preparation. I went in thinking I just need to point the camera at them. And I had questions that I asked, but my only regret of the entire documentary is I wish that I had done cast and crew members interviews last instead of first, because I was all over the board as far as what I was asking, because I didn't know really what to ask. And because there wasn't a lot of research to find at the time, I was just kind of asking about different movies and their careers, and then like, what was it like working with, those usual kind of questions.
Sure.
And so that's part of what's taken so long, is finding the good stuff in these, hour-long conversations where maybe 25 minutes is something interesting. And, I have Colleen Camp, we met in her office, and there's a good 5 minutes of footage of her ordering lunch from her assistant, because that's what she was doing. And, that's interesting, I guess, but it's not in the documentary. But so I didn't prep as much. Now, I'd love to do another one. I don't know what it's going to be. I'd love to do another one. And I feel like I'll have a much better idea of how to do it this time, because unfortunately, I do everything the hard way. And I do it wrong a few times. I mean, there's probably been, just from computer crashes alone, there's probably been 6 different versions of this documentary over the years. But this version I'm glad it did take so long, because there's stuff in here that I didn't have a couple of years ago that really make it pretty good.
So, I mean, what can we expect to know or learn from the doc? I mean, is it going to be, again, just kind of a telling of the origins of the film and backstage story? Like, what are we expecting? Because, like you mentioned Back in Time, and Back in Time spent a lot of time on fan culture around the film as well.
It definitely has some of that. It has we start right off the beginning of whose idea it was to make to make the film itself. This was the idea of producer Deborah Hill, from who from the Halloween and Halloween 2 and The Fog, and she worked with John Carpenter a lot, and amazing producer. And up to the different writers that wrote. Jonathan Lynn was not the first writer on the script. There were about 5 different writers on it. Some people have heard of. And originally it was at Universal, then it moved to Paramount. As far as the filming stories, there's nothing really too scandalous. They all pretty much loved each other, which I'm happy to hear. I wouldn't want to come in and have them go hate each other. There's one cast member that was not necessarily Jonathan Lynn's first choice, but he's in it, and I'll just
leave it
I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
We have not talked about that cast member yet in this interview, but he wasn't the first choice, and that's about as scandalous as it gets. But even that's not crazy, because that's just show business.
Yeah, man. Oh, this is awesome. So we've locked print. Are we done?
No. So the last thing now is I'm waiting for the music score. That's happening right now. And then after that, that's it. So the picture's locked. The sound is good. It's just the score.
So what can when can we expect to see this? What's the distribution model? Like, what are we going to do?
So I actually haven't said this anywhere. I've given lots of dates over the past years, because I foolishly thought I was almost done. So now the people that have been following me for a few years don't trust me at all as far as what I say it's coming out. But I will say with 95% certainty that it'll be out on physical media and streaming in October 2022.
Oh my God, well, we're right around the corner.
We're close.
Oh my gosh, that is
Yes.
right around the corner. Physical media
Yes.
and streaming. Now, can we reveal where it's going to be streaming or not yet?
I don't know actually yet. I'm working with the distributor right now, because that's something, again, I have no experience in myself. So right now they're waiting for me to deliver the goods, and then once that's done, we'll talk about
We'll get there.
Where it's going to be.
How'd you get your distributor for this movie? Did you have to pitch it to several different people? Did somebody say, "Hey, you should talk to so and so"?
It was somebody I met through the Instagram.
Really?
It was all through the Instagram, and it's a company that has distributed They're mainly known for vinyl records and soundtracks, re-releases, but they have also done a couple of movies or documentaries as well. And super nice, small little company, and they're gonna do it.
God, that's great.
And if in case it falls through, I won't say who it is, but I hope it doesn't. But because they haven't seen it yet, so they may watch it and go, "Oh no, never mind."
We're not doing this.
Yeah, that's right. So I don't want to put them in a bad spot, but it seems like it'll be them, and I'm really glad because they're very nice.
Now I had heard for a long time because like, okay, there's, like I said, there's a few movies that I'm just a really big fan of, and I always look for, okay, are we gonna get a new such and such movie? Like this year, we're getting a new Fletch, right?
Yeah.
Fletch is finally coming back with John Hamm as Fletch.
Just filmed in Boston.
Filmed in Boston, yes, of course. Based on my favorite of the book series, Confess Fletch. And Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale have famously said there's not going to be a Back to the Future remake or reboot or sequel of any kind, much to a lot of fans' enjoyment and pleasure to hear that. But Clue is one that I've always kept my finger on the pulse of, because I remember at some point, wasn't like the director of Pirates of the Caribbean going to like do a Clue movie too?
There have been a few names attached to the Clue remake. It always seems to be attached to Ryan Reynolds. I don't know who he planned to play. I don't know who he planned
It
to
would
play.
have to be like Wadsworth,
or
right?
how I would imagine it'd be a Wadsworth type character if they're going that rebooty with the original script. I mean, may have a whole new take on it. For a while, the director of the Muppets reboot was attached to it, which is fine. I love the Muppets. And then Jason Bateman, I think, was going to direct it, but I think he's kind of gone on to Ozark now and won't be doing Clue. And then just recently, I heard that there is a script, and it's still Ryan Reynolds' vehicle, but he's been pretty busy, so it's on hold. Originally, when I heard about it, I thought, I don't know if we need a remake of this. But when I saw Knives Out, which I really, really liked, I thought this is kind of, if it's like this, then okay, it doesn't have, then I just kind of saw the possibilities of it probably won't be doing, 1 + 2 + 2 + 1, that, because I don't think they could do that again. And I don't know what kind of cast they would get that would be like an ensemble, like Clue was. I guess the Murder on the Orient Express and the Death on the Nile were kind of like that, where they had, their little all-star cast, but I don't know. So I'm curious. I mean, it keeps. I asked about the remake to Leslie Ann Warren 5 years ago, and she wasn't crazy about it.
Oh, really?
At the time. So that's how long this remake has been talked about. I thought by the time I finish the documentary, maybe it'll be a time for the remake to come out, and I'll capitalize off of that. But amazingly, the documentary is going to come out before the remake does. Which I never thought would happen. And actually, some of my friends on Instagram have made that joke already, that what's coming first, the delayed, and I call it it's the Clue curse of delays. It's never on time.
Yeah, that's fun. So I'm gonna go see this stage production. What do you know about this, being the Clue aficionado that you are?
It's done a lot. There's a gentleman in the documentary. His name is Nick Brandt, and he directed during the pandemic a kids version of Clue, and it was done on Zoom, and it was very interesting to watch like 8 or 9 year olds doing it in the boxes on Zoom. And because they were underage, I couldn't use the footage of them doing it, but I talked to them about it. And I have a Google alert for Clue. And a lot of times that's not the movie at all. It's, the word Clue. I get a lot of crossword puzzle links. But I also get when they're doing stage plays, and sometimes on the Whodunit Facebook group, I'll forward, if you're in Akron, Ohio, they're having auditions for Clue. And it is based on the screenplay, the Jonathan Lynn screenplay. And I think I haven't seen one done. I would love to. There hasn't been one around me, but I think like one character, it might be Wadsworth, actually talks to the audience at some point in it, and it makes sense. I mean, when you look at Clue, it's a play.
Oh yeah.
It's one setting. It's got the energy. It's got the fast dialogue. It makes complete sense. So I hope to see it one day for sure.
Yeah, it seems easily adaptable to the
Yeah.
stage. You know, it's not one that you have to. I mean, they can make anything into a musical or a stage play, but this one
Back to the
seems.
Future.
Back to the Future has one. I haven't
I
seen.
never
but
thought I'd see that day, but here we are.
I know that was another one that was talked about forever. You know,
Yeah.
it was a forever in the works, and then finally they do it, and apparently everyone who's seen it over in the UK say it's phenomenal. It's going to come to the US next year. Hop, skip, and a
Okay.
jump from Boston, you know, over there on Broadway in New York. But I'm definitely going to have to make that trek. So how many? And if you don't want to reveal, it's okay. But how many cast
Mm-hmm.
members do we see in the doc? Did you get a nice handful?
Yeah, I got.
Obviously, some aren't here anymore.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. Oh, I would have loved to. Well, both Madeline Kahn and Eileen Brennan, I would have loved to have talked to.
Yeah.
Sadly, they passed. I talked to Colin Camp. I talked to Jane Jenkins, who was the casting director. I talked to Michael Kaplan, who was the costume designer. Talked to Jeffrey Kramer, who's the motorist. I talked to John DeLynn, obviously director, Michael McKean, we mentioned. Bill Taylor and Sid Dutton were the matte painters,
Oh, wow.
and they were cool. And Leslie Ann Warren and Lee Ving, Mr. Body, and came super close to talking to Tim Curry, but it didn't actually ever happen because I haven't told this story before, but I'll tell it
Gotta
now.
hear it. Gotta hear it.
So I had been talking to Tim Curry's person, and she was very excited about the documentary because this was about the time, it was during the pandemic, and it was about the time, right at the beginning of the pandemic. It's about the time Tim Curry was starting to do convention appearances, which now he does a lot, but before he wasn't doing a lot of appearances. So I was telling her about the documentary and how I'd like to take this to conventions and, have screenings of it there. And, and she was like, oh, that's perfect. So when Tim's there, he could talk about it. You could be there with selling the documentaries, and then I said, yeah, that'd be great. So we set up a date and it was all good. And then the morning of the interview, I woke up and I was sick as a dog, and I thought I have COVID. Because it was like March or April of
No.
2020, right? So right in the thick of it, I have COVID, and I am not going to give Tim Curry COVID.
Right.
So I emailed his person and said, I am so sorry. I am sick. I think I've got COVID. I don't want to get anybody sick. Can we reschedule? In hindsight, I should have called instead of email because she didn't see the email. So Tim Curry, from her description, sat around all day waiting for me to come to his house and was not happy with me at all. And that was her email to me. And I emailed back and said, oh, I'm so sorry. No, I emailed you. I promise. And she said, I didn't get it. So I went back into my sense and I said, here it is, which maybe that was a bad move too, actually, because it's kind of like, because it got real quiet after that. And then, like, oh, no. And it was the only time I was sad I didn't actually have COVID, because I didn't, but I wish I had. I got it much later. So then about 6 months later, I thought maybe, everything's cool. And I emailed her and said, hey, can we try it again? And she said, I'll ask him. And then that was it.
Never heard back.
And then never heard back.
Oh man,
I know.
that's a killer.
And it was because I was trying to save him.
You're trying to save the man's life.
Trying to save him. And I could have just gone and been unsure.
So what was it? Just like a cold that you developed, or allergies?
Yeah,
or
I was just
something?
sick. It was just
Just sickness.
stupid flu or whatever it was. It was, I was, stomach flu. It was gross. I did feel terrible. Then I felt worse. But yeah, it was heartbreaking for sure.
Oh man.
That close, because like you said, he is the heart, and it's a blow. And I hope people still want to see it, the documentary, even though now it's revealed that Tim Curry there's not a new interview with him. There is some archive footage of him, and there's certainly other cast members discussing how great he is. How could you not? But yeah, that's the Tim Curry story.
Oh man. Well, my heart goes out for you, but I will say, as great as it would have been to see Tim Curry, it does not dampen my expectations or excitement for this documentary. I'm serious. When I saw this because I saw it on Twitter, I'm like, a Clue documentary, 2 words, all in. Like I didn't even need to see a trailer or anything else. I just knew that we were going to get a Clue doc, and that makes me excited, man. So much success to you. I'll be a big supporter of it, and everybody listening to the show right now, make sure you go and seek out Who Done It, the Clue documentary, because you've been listening to the director, Mr. Jeff Smith, here for the last hour on the show. And Jeff, where can people find you? Where can they get info on the doc, when it's going to come out? Any trailers, clips, YouTube channels?
Definitely. All the links for all the social media, it's me. I'm pretty online a lot, almost every day, at least posting something Clue related on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And we have some clips from the documentary already on YouTube. You can find all the links at the website, which is cluedoc.com.
Cluedoc.com is where you can find all the info. It's just a few months away, guys. Make sure you go out there and support it. And I just know that it's that 1985 trilogy of films. If you like one of them, you like all of them. So go check out Clue, and we're excited, man. I really am. And Jeff, I appreciate you taking the time, my friend.
Definitely. No, it's been fun.
All right, Clue. The documentary is coming. Who done it? Go check it out. Jeff Smith, again, thanks so much.
Thanks, Brad.
And there you have Jeff Smith here on this edition of Back to the Future podcast. Make sure you go follow him on social media, find the YouTube channel, watch the trailer for the documentary coming out very, very soon. I can't wait to see that, man. I love Clue the movie. Go stream the movie. Go stream it. Do yourself a favor. If you're with a significant other or a roommate who's never seen it, do them a favor. Stream Clue the movie and then go watch the documentary when it comes out. My thanks to Jeff Smith. My thanks to my mother for making an appearance, and my thanks to Allegra for helping me deal with these allergies. Until next time, I'm your friend in time, Brad Gilmore. This is Back to the Future, the podcast, the only podcast looking back in time to the greatest film trilogy of all time, and I will see you in the future.